unpacking the past on my journey through love, growth, and redemption. My girlfriend and I have been dating for about a year. I'll call her Casey here. We've been living together for 2 months. A few hours ago, Casey approached me saying she wanted to talk about something serious. At first, I didn't know what to expect, but she wanted to share something traumatic that had happened to her before we met and asked if I was willing to listen. Of course, I said yes if she was ready to tell me. Casey hesitated for a moment, as if unsure whether to tell me, but then she shared the whole story. What happened was that when she was a college student, she had a crush on a pizza delivery guy. He worked at a small shop near her apartment and often delivered her orders. She wanted to ask him out but didn't know how, so she consulted her friends. Her group of friends discussed the issue, and one of them suggested she answer the door in lingerie. The others quickly got excited about the idea, and although Casey had her doubts, they convinced her to try it. Apparently, they even went together to buy the lingerie. Casey did her makeup, styled her hair, and ordered a pizza. When the delivery guy arrived, she did exactly what her friend suggested. She opened the door in revealing lingerie. At first, the delivery guy didn't say anything, but Casey, desperate, insisted on the matter. She asked him, "What do you think of my outfit?" He responded, "Mom, please don't do this," and then left. At this point in the story, Casey was on the verge of tears, telling me how embarrassed and awful she felt. I was almost expecting something more from the story, but she had finished. So I said, you realize you weren't the victim here, you were the aggressor, right? She visibly flinched at that comment. She then justified herself by blaming everyone else, her friends for tricking her, society in general, and even the pizza delivery guy she had sexually harassed. In response, I told her it was like those men who expose themselves in hotels, deliberately timing it so that housekeeping staff find them. She insisted it was completely different, and a heated argument broke out. She ended the fight by saying, "I came to you to feel better, and now I feel worse," and stormed off. I stood there for a moment, stunned. This was not how I had imagined the evening would go. When she approached me saying she wanted to talk about something serious, I thought it might be about us, maybe our future or some issue we could work through together. But this, it felt like an ethical and emotional maze I wasn't prepared for. I found myself replaying the interaction in my mind, analyzing every word. Had I been too harsh? Could I have handled the situation differently? The truth is, I understood why she felt vulnerable. Admitting something that had clearly haunted her for years must have been difficult. But on the other hand, I couldn't help but feel that her perspective on the situation was distorted, skewed in a way that absolved her of responsibility. Isn't growth about recognizing your mistakes and learning from them? I found myself pacing around the apartment, occasionally glancing at the closed door of our bedroom where she had taken refuge. The air felt heavy, loaded with unresolved tension between us. I wanted to knock on the door to try to make things right, but part of me hesitated. What could I say to her? That I was sorry she felt bad? That I was sorry for pointing out an uncomfortable truth? The lines between right and wrong, support and enabling, felt blurry. I thought about the story she told me, imagining it from her perspective. The nerves she must have felt, the shame from the delivery guy's reaction, the regret that followed. But then, I thought about it from his perspective. There he was, just doing his job. And suddenly he was put in an uncomfortable and inappropriate situation. He didn't ask for that. He didn't deserve that. It wasn't just an awkward moment for Casey. It was a violation of his boundaries. The more I thought about it, the more conflicted I felt. Relationships are about empathy and understanding. But where do you draw the line? How do you balance supporting your partner with holding them accountable? These questions swirled in my mind as I finally sat down on the couch, exhausted but restless. Hours passed, and the silence in the apartment felt deafening. Finally, I heard the creak of the bedroom door. Casey came out, her eyes red and swollen from crying. At first, she didn't say anything, just stood there looking at me. I opened my mouth to speak, but she raised a hand, stopping me. "I've been thinking about what you said," she began, her voice trembling. "And I still don't agree with how you said it, but maybe you have a point." I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this could be a turning point. an opportunity to have a real conversation about accountability and growth. I didn't want to make you feel worse, I said carefully, but I also couldn't ignore the other side of the story. She nodded, but her expression was conflicted. I know I was wrong, she admitted, but it's hard to face that, you know? It's easier to think it was all someone else's fault. My friends, society, whoever. Admitting I made someone else uncomfortable. That's not easy. I could see the vulnerability in her eyes and my heart softened. It's not easy, I agreed. But maybe that's the point. The hard things are what help us grow. And I'm here for you, Casey. I just want us to be able to have these conversations, even when they're uncomfortable. She sat down next to me, and for the first time that night, the tension between us seemed to ease. We didn't resolve everything in that moment, not by a long shot, but it felt like a step in the right direction, a step toward understanding each other better, even when it's messy and imperfect. The night stretched on, and we talked about other things, lighter things, trying to regain a sense of normalcy. But the earlier conversation lingered in the back of my mind. It wasn't over, not by a long shot. There were still questions to answer, emotions to unravel, and perspectives to reconcile. This was just the beginning of a longer journey for Casey, for me, and for us as a couple. The tension in the apartment lingered long after our conversation had ended. Casey had retreated to the bedroom again, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I tried distracting myself with a movie, scrolling through my phone, even cleaning the kitchen, but nothing silenced the questions swirling in my head. Were we fundamentally mismatched? Was this an isolated incident or a sign of deeper incompatibilities? As I sat on the couch with the hum of the refrigerator in the background, I thought back to the Casey I met at the beginning. She had always been so vibrant, so full of energy and ideas. Her stories were colorful, animated by her expressive personality, and that was something I had loved about her. But tonight had revealed a different side of her, a side harder to reconcile with the person I thought I knew. I found myself wondering how Casey's friends had reacted back then. Did they laugh at the situation, dismissing her discomfort as a natural part of their risky plan? Or did they grasp the gravity of what had happened and support her as she dealt with the consequences? It seemed strange that Casey had carried this memory alone for so long, without fully processing it. Maybe that's why she finally decided to share it with me. Perhaps she thought I could help her make sense of it, even though it had happened years ago. Eventually, I heard the creak of the bedroom door opening again. Casey emerged, her face full of mixed emotions. I braced myself for another intense conversation, but I was surprised when she headed to the kitchen instead. I watched as she poured herself a glass of water, her movements deliberate and almost mechanical. She didn't look at me at first, and I decided to let her take the lead. "I've been thinking," she finally said in a barely audible whisper. She turned to face me, leaning against the counter. "About what you said earlier." I nodded, unsure of where this was going. And I don't think I ever really understood what happened that day. I know it was embarrassing, and I've always thought of it as a big traumatic moment for me, but I think I never truly saw it from his perspective. This was progress, I thought. "It's not easy to do that," I said cautiously. "It's hard to admit when we've made mistakes, especially ones that affect other people." She took a sip of water, her gaze distant. "The thing is, I don't think I've ever dealt with it. I've just carried it, like something heavy I couldn't talk about. And I think that's why what you said upset me so much. I felt like you were attacking me, even though you weren't." "I wasn't trying to attack you," I said gently. "I just wanted to be honest. I thought it was important to see the situation for what it was, even if it's uncomfortable." She nodded slowly. "I get that now, but it's still hard to hear, hard to process." I stood and walked over to her, leaning on the counter beside her. "It's okay for it to be hard. Nobody's perfect, Casey. We all have things we're not proud of. What matters is what we do with those experiences. Do we learn from them, or do we let them define us?" She looked at me, searching for something in my eyes. "I don't want this to define me, but I also don't know how to let it go. It feels so tangled, you know? Like part of me just wants to forget it, but another part knows I need to face it." "Maybe forgetting isn't the answer," I suggested. "Maybe the answer is unraveling it piece by piece." really looking at what happened, why it happened, and what you can learn from it. It won't be easy, but it could be worth it. She sighed, running a hand through her hair. I'm scared. Scared of what I might find if I really analyze it. That's normal, I said, but you don't have to do it alone. I'm here, Casey. We can figure it out together. For the first time that night, she smiled, a small, tentative smile, but a smile nonetheless. Thank you, she said softly, for not giving up on me. I'm not going anywhere, I replied. The days following our conversation about Casey's past felt like walking a tightrope. There was an unspoken awareness between us that we were treading new ground in our relationship, a space that was both fragile and complicated. Casey seemed quieter than usual, as if lost in her thoughts, but she also seemed more present, as if beginning to accept the weight of what she had shared. One night after dinner, she brought up something unexpected. You know, I've been thinking about going back to therapy, she said, her voice hesitant. I looked up from my plate, surprised but encouraged. That's a big step, I said. Do you feel ready for it? She shrugged. I don't know if ready is the right word, but I've realized there are a lot of things I haven't faced. Not just the thing with the pizza guy. Other things too. Things I've buried because it was easier than dealing with them. I reached across the table and took her hand. I think it's really brave of you to consider it. Therapy can be a great way to untangle all of that. Yeah, she said softly. I just hope it helps. I don't want to keep feeling stuck. In the days that followed, Casey started searching for therapists in our area. I could tell she was nervous about taking the leap, but I tried to be as supportive as possible, offering to help with scheduling or just listening when she wanted to talk about her options. Eventually, she chose someone who specialized in trauma and personal growth and scheduled her first session. The morning of her appointment, Casey was visibly anxious. She paced around the apartment, checking her phone and fiddling with her hair. What if I don't like it? She asked at one point. What if the therapist doesn't understand me? It's okay if it takes time to find the right connection, I said. The first session doesn't have to be perfect. It's just the first step. She nodded, though I could tell my words only partially reassured her. When it was time to leave, I gave her a hug and told her I was proud of her. Let me know if you need anything, I said. A few hours later, she came home looking exhausted but relieved. That was intense, she said, collapsing onto the couch. Do you want to talk about it? I asked gently. She shook her head. Not yet. I need to process it first. In the weeks that followed, Casey attended therapy regularly, and I noticed subtle changes in her behavior. She seemed lighter in some ways, more thoughtful in others. She began sharing small snippets of what she was working on in her sessions, old wounds she was confronting, patterns she was trying to understand. One night, as we lay in bed, she brought up something that surprised me. You know, I've been thinking a lot about why I told you that story about the pizza guy, she said. I think part of me wanted you to absolve me or something, to tell me it wasn't as bad as I thought. I turned to look at her, propping myself up on an elbow. Do you still feel that way? I asked. She hesitated, then shook her head. No, I think I'm starting to understand that it's not about being absolved. It's about taking responsibility and figuring out how to move forward. But that's scary, you know? Because once you take responsibility, you can't hide behind excuses anymore. That's true, I said, but it's also empowering. Taking responsibility means you have the power to change, to do better. She smiled faintly. Yeah, my therapist said something similar. She said guilt can be useful, but only if you use it as a catalyst for growth. Otherwise, it just keeps you stuck. That's very insightful, I said, and it sounds like you're making a lot of progress. I hope so, she said, but it's still hard. I keep wondering what other parts of myself I've been avoiding. It's like opening a closet and finding a bunch of stuff you forgot was in there. That's part of the process, I said, and you don't have to do it all at once. One thing at a time. As Casey continued her journey of self-discovery, our relationship also began to evolve. We started having deeper, more honest conversations about our individual struggles and how they intersected. It wasn't always easy. There were moments of tension, misunderstandings, and difficulty communicating. But there were also moments of connection, moments when we felt closer than ever. One night, Casey suggested starting a new tradition, a weekly check-in where we could talk about anything on our minds. It doesn't have to be heavy, she said. It could be as simple as sharing what made us happy that week or something we're looking forward to. I just think it would be good to have that time set aside for us. I loved the idea, and we started our first check-in that Friday. We lit a couple of candles, turned off our phones, and sat on the couch with mugs of tea. At first, it felt a little awkward, like we were trying to structure something that usually happened naturally. But as we got into the rhythm, the conversation flowed more easily.